Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today. Again, I know it's been a lot of your boy lately, but shout out to our editors, Josh and Dan. As the three-man army, we've made all the content between Retro Rebound and Mr. Matty work in this very busy weekend. So just shout out to them for making that possible without a tremendous amount of burnout. It's been awesome to see the response to all the content we're putting out, and we hope you've been enjoying it. But today, we close our Summer Games conversation with a special one. We already talked about the Outer Worlds 2. We dove into the Xbox showcase. We dove into every other showcase before that, and there's only one perfect way to end things, and that's to talk about Clockwork Revolution. Easily my game of the show at the Xbox Game Showcase by a country mile. We get a 5+ minute trailer of just pure glow ups, just glow up after glow up. Look, I'm going to get into the history of inXile in a moment here, but this trailer should put a lot of people on watch. They're about to do something special here, as I'll highlight. We're going to go into not only some of my thoughts on the trailer and little details I picked out from it, but also information over on the Xbox Wire interview that Xbox conducted alongside inXile Entertainment to get some more information on the game and what we actually saw during that trailer. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into what's going on with Clockwork Revolution, I know they say at the end of the trailer, it's available in due time, but man, I hope that time is coming up soon. And maybe I could get that Clockwork Gauntlet and fast forward time and get my hands on this game a little bit sooner. That'd be sick, but nonetheless, we're going to try to be patient. Just let them cook, because this will be worth the wait. That I am confident of. But anyway, if you're new here and you're into what's going on with Clockwork Revolution, consider subscribing. I want to start off with a little bit of the history of inXile, to just watch as their games over the years have transformed. This sounds insulting, but I don't mean it that way. They made a very particular style of game. I look at Wasteland 2 and Wasteland 3. That's what I think of when I think inXile. And that's a great thing. These are amazing RPGs. This is the series that gave birth to my favorite game series, Fallout. So I owe inXile and the minds there like Brian Fargo everything, and I'm infinitely excited for anything they're doing. But when I think of their games, that's what comes to mind. And Wasteland 3 had moments of great production value. There are some conversations in that game that are fully animated. The characters and the world are really brought to life, but for the most part, you're sort of seeing the game at a bird's eye view, and they work really well with that. It's excellent, but it's definitely not to the level of what you saw at Clockwork Revolution. To jump from Wasteland 3 and that sort of production quality to what Clockwork's doing, that reminds me a lot of Larian Studios. And it's funny because I find these teams to be parallel to one another. Divinity Original Sin 2 was one of my favorite RPGs for a long while. Then along comes Baldur's Gate 3, and while it's incredible, it's one of my favorite RPGs ever as well, it was so nice just to see people recognize how incredible Larian is and always has been. inXile, I feel, is due for that moment. Wasteland 3 is one of the most overlooked RPGs of the last generation, and that pains me to say, because anytime I get a chance to champion that game, I do so. It is wonderful from top to bottom. The choices, the reactivity. You want to talk about a game that I think even sometimes surpasses games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Divinity Original Sin 2 in the terms of reactivity? Wasteland 3. That team knows how to make the world react to you. It's unbelievable. It's spiderwebs among spiderwebs, as I always define it. So to know that RPG pedigree and to see them actually carrying that into Clockwork in really interesting and unique ways is hype to me. But again, it's coming with a major uptick in production value that just mirrors a lot of the situation that Larian found themselves in. So I hope at the end of all of this, inXile is on the positive side of the conversation. But a 5+ minute trailer for a game that's still a ways out, plus a already 2+ minute trailer that we got a couple years ago, shows this game is cooking along just fine if they got that much to show. Whoo boy! So what is going on with this game? Well, we're still light on a lot of core narrative details here. I think the idea is that inXile wants to be cagey about this until they can give us at least an exact release date. But what we've got here is one of the coolest character creators we've seen in a game. The way all of the art is connected to it, and there's like little statues for every single stat, trait, attribute, everything, your backgrounds, it's all highlighted here. In the Xbox Wire breakdown, they actually define this as potentially their most expensive in-game asset they've ever made in their company's history, which I think is hilarious, but totally worth it. You see the backgrounds there, and there are many of them, like being a bookworm, but these backgrounds determine your character traits. However, one thing that I didn't really catch in the trailer or think much about until I read it in the Xbox Wire post is this is a set character, like a set name, and they do have a story, and here's what they write. To bring you up to speed, you'll play as Morgan Vannet, a customizable player character and member of the Rotten Row Hooligans gang, who discovers that the world they live in has been altered by the enigmatic Lady Ironwood. She's unnaturally manipulated history through her use of time travel to bring herself immense power and wealth, while keeping the working class under heel. After discovering her method of traveling into the past, you're thrust into an adventure across time to turn back the clock and right Ironwood's wrongs however you see fit. So as you can see, like, it's a pretty set character. And on top of that, this character is voiced. This is really different for inXile to be doing, giving your character a voice. So I don't really have the worries that I had with, say, other game studios bringing in that voice character. I think of Bethesda, of course, where Fallout 4, we saw that, went, oh boy. First off, this is a new IP, so they kind of have free reign to do that thing. Number two, whenever I see set character name, hardcore RPG, I think of Mass Effect. And that's a really good sign, because I adore Mass Effect, and that is a very reactive RPG. But this, with its time traveling idea, could be one of the most reactive RPGs we see on a visual level. Now, to get into that, I want to depict where we are in the trailer, because there was a first trailer which was a completely different district of the main city in the game called Avalon, and that was called Midward. It was an upper class region. Meanwhile, in this second trailer, the one that we got, the 5+ minute one during the 2025 showcase, was in the poorer part of the city called Tangle, and this is actually where your journey begins. So a lot of what we saw here were probably the opening hours of the game. So if you like what you saw, this was early game, dude. What? Crazy. But the real selling point here for Clockwork Revolution is that time travel system. And this trailer really unpacked that in an exciting way. First off, it's the story stuff. I mean, if you go and read the Xbox Wire article, Brian Fargo, the game's director, everyone who's part of this team could not emphasize more, like, look, we know you see first-person shooting and action and better production value, but RPG, RPG, RPG. Reactivity, reactivity, reactivity. Like, they even boldly say, we're doing something that we think has never been done before, which is very rare for a developer to come out with their chest out and be like, yeah, no one has done this before. But the idea is you go back in time, you change something, and then you visit the present day, and you see how that changes. So that's a really cool way for quests to play with time. But also, we see even in the trailer how there's a plaza with like 4 different statues that appear, and the environment surrounding that statue is also entirely different. And this is just probably main story decisions molded around your choice. Can you imagine solving puzzles even this way? Like, there's so many interesting elements that they can take from this time travel mechanic and make this game feel distinct because of it, not just for its story, but no doubt that story reactivity is going to make it really sing. Because one thing that inXile did really well with Wasteland 3 was just letting you be this tornado ripping through the lands that you are within and just being this destructive force and just changing the environment based on how you go through it. And I feel like this game's going to be no different, especially because it's time traveling, right? And like, this is, when you hear time traveling in games, most times we think about like the MCU, we're like, oh boy, that again. But this is like actual interactive time travel. So I'm very excited about it. There is also a cool stealth takedown I picked up in the trailer that I thought was just really nice. Like, you just completely accelerate the aging of an enemy and they turn into skull and bones and then into dust. Brilliant. They actually break down in the Xbox Wire some of these time powers, and they say your core time powers are useful both in and out of combat. For example, slow can be used on enemies to temporarily slow them and their bullets, helping you reduce a threat, but you can also use the same power on environmental objects to solve puzzles and avoid hazards. Reverse is the same way. You can rewind cover objects in case enemies destroy what you're ducking behind, but also allows you to unload on someone and then rip the bullets back out. All these things, gadgets, time powers, weapons, your stats, and even Prentice, are all part of the larger interwoven RPG systems and skill trees. So they aren't just an unlock it and you're done component, they're all part of the journey of leveling up and increasing your ability to deal with the Ironwood threat. So yeah, these are just a couple of the time travel powers here, but you can see there's an in-combat use and an out-of-combat use. And this is also something that I think will be really interesting to see how inXile tackles it. Because is there going to be, say, what we saw with the Outer Worlds, where there's kind of like environmental skill checks, like what is your character's affinity for something and how you interact with an object in the environment? Or is it going to come down to these abilities and then most of the checking happens in dialogue? Speaking of which, we did see real choice and consequence in the dialogue. Like, you chose to ignore a shopkeeper and talk to someone else in the meanwhile. And because you kept doing that, he lost his mind and broke someone's skull wide open with a statue for whatever reason. This is something that inXile is really known for, because they have people who worked on series like Arcanum and Fallout and like these old CRPGs that have like dark humor, but also like steampunk elements. And this is kind of a combination of those. In fact, you'll actually see in the Xbox Wire post, one thing that they do point out is that the idea for this game started because so many people were asking Brian Fargo to remake Arcanum. And so that is what gave birth to this game. And they even break it down here in the Xbox Wire post. They say, it highlights our multi-person conversation. Some conversations will have multiple people involved, and who you choose to speak to can send you to different dialogue branches. This could wildly change where a conversation ends up going. In the case of the trailer, Morgan chose to speak to Errol instead of Alfie, despite obvious warnings, and that resulted in poor Errol's death. So if you choose to go down that path, Errol is then a character that won't be there for the rest of the game. Brian then says, conversations have meaningful consequences, and I think it's worth mentioning we have truly evil conversation options. You see a few of those play out in the trailer. If you're offering evil options, they need to actually pay off and have meaningful consequences in order for the good choices to feel good. Otherwise, you're not playing the way you want to play. And I like this being highlighted here, because the problem people usually have with hardcore RPG developers adding in a voice protagonist is because what happens is then they feel natural in one state and not the other. We do see in this trailer, Morgan literally has a gun and is just shooting someone multiple times as they crawl on the floor. So I got this kind of vibe right away. I was like, oh, that's a little dark. But at the same time, as I was saying earlier, this game's also hilarious, like beating someone's head open with a statue and just like, well, brains. I'm like, okay, this game's also ridiculous. So very exciting on that front. But I like that they're highlighting evil choices, evil consequences. Because I think for a lot of us, Fallout 4 was that moment of reflection, right? As much as I love Fallout 4, that was the moment we noticed where a player voice can over-define an RPG character where there's only one way to play. And you kind of don't want that in your hardcore RPGs, especially from a team that is so well known for choice and consequence. The last thing I want to get into is just weapon customization. We actually got a really good look at this. And one thing they talked about in the Xbox Wire post is that these are like weapons you pick up and you have for the rest of the game. This did not give me the vibe that this is a crunchy number game in the terms of looters, like you're picking up your blue pistol or something like that. I think there's a place for that in other games, but I like that this game seems to be focusing on, instead of loot, it's upgrades. And you saw in the menus, like there's clearly parts that you'll loot in the environment that you can then use to upgrade your weapon. It was everything from your barrel to your sight to your magazine, your stock, your receiver, and more. And I even saw a silenced barrel at one point. It didn't look like a silencer. It was this like weird array looking thing, but it did seem to incentivize stealth gameplay. So I'm curious to see how that'll play out and how that influences level design. But at the end of that, I kind of got the vibe that this is more of like an RPG where you get all these tools and abilities and then you customize them further, rather than like swapping out your pistol for like a new orange pistol or something along those lines. So very keen on that. But they seem to really try to assure people between both the Xbox Wire interview and the trailer itself that this is like a hardcore RPG first and foremost, and that this is them trying to kind of shoot for the stars of doing what they did with something like Wasteland 3 at the same time as delivering like first-person shooting gameplay and higher fidelity and a grander world and a more reactive world. And it's all going to come down to that time travel system, which they're showing in action in 2 trailers now. And the idea of it is so exciting to me that it has me like jumping in my seat. So the sooner this game gets a release date, the better for me. I don't know if it'll be next year based on what Phil Spencer said was coming in 2026 and Forza, and then of course Gears as well as Halo. But if this is a 27 game, that wait is going to be agonizing, because out of really every announced Xbox RPG, yes, even Fable, Clockwork is top of my list, man. So really excited for the team at inXile. I'm glad to see, this is going to sound like a little parasocial of me, but like, I'm really glad to see people are excited for them and about the game, because I can only imagine how they're feeling, where it's like, yes, like we're not just the CRPG developers, like look at this cool thing, shower us with praise, you know. So I'm hyped for them, and I was really rooting for them, because I had a feeling when I guessed that this trailer would be here, that it would really knock people's socks off if it was like a strong showing, which it was. I mean, 5+ minutes, that's so much more than most trailers deliver, as we could tell by the showcase. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I've got to say on Clockwork Revolution. Y'all let me know your thoughts down below. Other than that, I will catch you in the next one. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all.